All right, let's dive deep into our own cells today. We're going to uncover this single, massive molecule that basically acts as a master switch, controlling how our body uses energy. It's a fascinating story about fuel, efficiency, and, well, what happens when this critical switch goes haywire.
So think about the last meal you ate. All the energy from that food just flooded your system, and every single one of your cells has to make this immediate, super important decision. Should we burn this fuel right now, or should we pack it away as fat for later?
This choice is really at the absolute heart of our metabolism. It's this constant balancing act that pretty much determines everything, from how energetic you feel to your long-term health. So how does the body actually make that call?
Okay, so when we're talking about this, we're mostly talking about carbohydrates, which break down into glucose. Your body can use that glucose immediately for power. But if you've got extra, it can convert it into fatty acids and just store it for the long haul. Making the right call here is absolutely critical.
So who, or maybe what, is making this huge decision? Well, it's not you, not consciously anyway. It's all handled by this incredible piece of molecular machinery.
Let me introduce you to the star of our show, the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, or PDH for short. And when I say massive, I mean it. At 9.5 megadaltons, that's a unit of molecular weight, it is an absolute giant in the cellular world. It's built from over 100 different protein parts, and its job is to be the main gatekeeper that decides the fate of all that glucose.
So here's the play-by-play. First, that glucose from your food gets broken down into a smaller molecule called pyruvate. This is where PDH steps up. If the gate is open, PDH irreversibly, and that's the key word, it irreversibly converts that pyruvate into something else called acetyl-CoA. This is a one-way street. Once this happens, there's no going back. That acetyl-CoA is like the master key that unlocks the cell's main powerhouse, the citric acid cycle, where it gets burned for a ton of energy.
Now, you can't have a gatekeeper that powerful without an equally powerful way to control it, right? So how does the cell tell PDH when to open up and when to stay shut?
The mechanism is actually beautiful in its simplicity. It all comes down to this tiny little molecule called a phosphate group. You stick a phosphate on to PDH, it turns off. You pluck that phosphate off, it turns back on. It's literally a molecular on-off switch.
And this is where it gets really cool. Think of it just like driving a car. You've got a family of 4 enzymes called PDKs that act as the brakes. They're the ones that add the phosphate and turn PDH off. Then you've got another pair of enzymes, the PDPs, and they act as the accelerator. They remove the phosphate and turn PDH on. Your cell is constantly, delicately fine-tuning the pressure on the brake and the gas.
So what's telling the cell to hit the brakes or the gas? It's all about supply and demand. When the cell is already chock full of energy in the form of molecules like acetyl-CoA, NADH, and ATP, which are basically the cell's energy currency, it hits the brakes. It turns PDH off. But when there's a lot of raw fuel just sitting around, like pyruvate, it hits the accelerator, turning PDH on to get it processed.
This whole system is just so incredibly elegant when it works. But what happens when the switch breaks? Well, the consequences can be absolutely devastating.
And a malfunctioning PDH switch is directly linked to some major diseases. In diabetes, for example, one of those brake enzymes, PDK4, is way too active, which stops cells from using glucose the right way. In a lot of cancers, a different brake, PDK1, gets slammed on, forcing the cancer cells into this wildly inefficient but super fast growth mode. And in rare genetic disorders like Lee's disease, the PDH complex itself is just broken, leading to really severe neurological problems. This quote from the source material really gets to the heart of what cancer is doing. Cancer cells, they essentially hijack this PDH switch. They deliberately turn it off because they want to rewire their entire energy system to support their own out-of-control growth.
Looking at them side by side makes it crystal clear. In a normal, healthy cell, PDH is on. It's efficiently burning glucose for a huge energy payoff. But a cancer cell, it intentionally shuts PDH off. Instead, it ferments glucose, which, from an energy perspective, is incredibly wasteful. But it's very, very fast. And that speed gives it all the raw building blocks it needs to make new cancer cells at a terrifying rate.
So, okay, understanding this switch is one thing. But if you want to develop treatments for these diseases, scientists need a way to actually see what the switch is doing inside our cells. This is where the real detective work comes in. Researchers have developed some amazing tools to measure PDH activity, which basically lets them peek under the hood and see if the engine is running smoothly or if the brakes are stuck on.
You know, in the past, measuring this was a really difficult, sometimes even dangerous process. But now we have these modern tools, like simple dipstick tests, that let scientists quickly, safely, and accurately measure exactly how active PDH is in any given sample. It is a massive leap forward for research.
And here's what that actually looks like in an experiment. This chart shows the level of the off signal. That's the phosphorylation. The first bar shows normal untreated cells where the off signal is low, meaning PDH is on and active. But in the second bar, scientists have added a chemical that forces the brakes on, and you can see that off signal just shoots way up, confirming that PDH has been switched off. This is exactly how they can test new drugs to see if they can actually fix a broken switch.
Which brings us to our final thought here. We've seen how this one molecular complex, this master switch, sits right at the crossroads of health and disease, impacting things like cancer and diabetes. So the big question, the one that scientists are racing to answer is, if we can find the right key to control this one switch, could we unlock a whole new generation of cures?